At the studio with Kitchen Theory, we have Neil Davey, a freelance writer and author of The Bluffer's Guide to Chocolate, The Bluffer's Guide to Food. Neil has written for The Guardian, The Daily Telegraph, The Daily Mail, Square Mile, Delicious Magazine, and many, many others. Today, we're going to be discussing vegan burgers, artificial intelligence, the restaurant of the future, and food waste. So, Neil, it's amazing to have you here at the studio. Thank you so much for making the time and coming by.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks.
So I mentioned to you because when we were kind of chatting a moment ago, I was telling you that what happens at Kitchen Theory is I end up having amazing conversations with people like yourself that are really, really interesting. We want to share that with people. And a lot of interesting things going on around food and gastronomy that I thought as a kind of food writer and someone with your kind of interest and perspective on food that we could kind of take a look at. The first of which is looking at fast food, and specifically vegan fast food.
The impossible.
What are your feelings on this?
It's an interesting, the whole concept, the rise of veganism and veganism will save the planet is something that I've written a little bit about of late, been reading up quite a lot on. I know I was looking at the Impossible Burger, or the rise of the Impossible Burger, and this plant-based, highly processed thing that looks like meat and tastes like meat and bleeds like meat. And
well, it's the bleeding like meat thing that for me really works.
Yeah.
On that sensory level. I think that's where they got it right, where maybe others haven't.
It's interesting. I've tried them a couple of times and it's a remarkable product.
Yeah.
Whether there is this strange idea, I mean, Leon recently were advertising the fact they were doing vegetarian meatballs. They currently got vegetarian wings. I'm like, well, they're not though, are they? They're not. They're not meatballs. They're not wings. They are shaped vegetable things. Yeah. And I feel the same with the Impossible Burger a little. The best kind of vegetarian fast food I've had recently has been probably just straightforward. I know a piece of cauliflower done in an interesting manner, and I can't help but think this sense of, well, it's got to have vegetarian bacon or the vegetarian sausage, and go, well, vegetables are really, really nice.
I couldn't agree with you
just
more.
Just as they are.
Yeah.
And I do find it strange. And also the Impossible Burger, and I printed off the ingredients earlier, and there's 17 things I had to look up. Not sure that's...
Well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? That's the kind of question about, does eating a vegan diet mean a healthier diet?
Absolutely.
And I think when you look at these kind of very heavily processed products, like, what we're talking about here, I don't necessarily have the answer for it myself, but I don't know. I think there's a general perception if you're eating a plant-based vegan diet that in some way means you're eating a healthier diet. And I think if it is plant-based and if you're cooking from scratch at home yourself, I can completely see how that works. But as you said, I'm not quite sure, if that, a vegan diet of these processed foods means a healthier diet.
Absolutely. I think anything that makes you stop and think about what you're eating is great, brilliant thing. Yeah. It's got to be encouraged.
Yeah.
And I think there has been this remarkable disconnect, particularly in the UK, particularly in the US, between what comes off a farm or what's on the farm to begin with and what appears in a supermarket or appears on your plate.
Yeah.
All the Jamie Oliver things of the chicken nuggets and people not associating that thing with two legs and a wing and a beak and attitude is the same as these little nuggets of things that you've got from the supermarket or the golden arches. But if it makes you stop and think, I think it's brilliant. There is this perception that, say, veganism will save the world. We must all switch to a plant-based diet. I've been through Spain a few times recently. And if you come out of, say, Almeria Airport and drive, for about 45 minutes, you just go past, it's acre after acre of polytunnels.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I've seen this.
And this sense of, we need to grow food this way to cope with the demand at the moment.
Yeah.
Not with everyone going plant-based.
Yeah.
This attitude that, this is what we have to do to grow these things. And I have had vegetarians and vegans kind of come after me, or they post on social media, and it's always the same clips of, I don't know, some mass-produced, usually it's like an American mass production facility of meat, with undercover footage of cows being punched in the face, or someone juggling piglets, or whatever it is, some act of cruelty.
Or little kind of porterholes. I've seen that in the
And here's a carrot. And I go, yeah, but a lot of can you tell me everything on your plate? Can you tell me everything about it? Can you tell me where it came from?
Yeah.
And can you tell me the pesticides used, the herbicides, the fungicides?
Yeah.
There's lots of evidence to suggest the pesticide runoff from this mass production of vegetables and fruit is getting into the rivers, and it's killing off marine life. So there's this kind of disconnect that, as you say, this presumption that it's healthy, it's the best thing for the planet. Not necessarily.
So that brings up something really interesting, because we're working with some guys at Imperial College, and actually Dr. Kirill Veselkov, he appeared on one of our video podcasts, and we were talking about kind of artificial intelligence and essentially using artificial intelligence to identify cancer-beating molecules within certain foods. And one of the issues that we kind of flagged up was you don't necessarily know, depending on the region, the terroir, and the where it's grown, what conditions it's been stored under, what nutrients are still in the product by the time it gets to the shelf.
Absolutely.
And also, is eating a plant-based diet based on vegetables that come from supermarkets, does that have all the nutrients that you necessarily need? And I think there's a lot of questions around that we know generally, cabbage may have 9 different types of cancer-beating molecules, but whether the cabbage in my local supermarket chain has those same properties I don't really know.
Absolutely. And I think there's predictions at the moment, we've got maybe 40 harvests left before there is no nutritional value in the majority of the soil. We're meeting today. I mean, the United Nations having this, they're releasing a report today about the climate crisis reducing the land's ability to sustain humanity, and how we must switch to a more moderate diet. They're not promoting that veganism will save the world, but shifting to more plant-based things. In order to do that, I do think we need to look at a much, much bigger picture. There are things. The owner of the Ginger Pig once told me that he might have, say, 1,500 head of cattle in a field. I said, and they will go and see them every day, and that if one looks poorly, they isolate it, they take it to a vet. That one is treated. If you have 3,000 head of cattle in one of these awful mass production facilities, you have to give antibiotics to everyone.
Wow.
Because one gets sick, they're all going to get sick because of the proximity.
Yeah.
So if this leads to an end of that sort of mass production, or the assumption that you should have meat at every meal 3 times a day, 7 days a week, that there should be this availability of sort of the cheap burgers, the cheap chicken. No, meat should be a luxury item.
Yeah.
Through various things and articles and this book just written for a steak restaurant, I've watched lots of animals die over the last 18 months. And it's like I kind of forced myself to go and watch, because I like meat.
Yeah.
I want to keep eating meat. I need to see the entire process. I need to understand what's happening. And you watch, and it was 2 very, very good facilities, a very humane abattoir, a collective of farmers in the Lake District who are very concerned about animal welfare, are trying to do everything they can, everything right. So they bring the animals that are going to be slaughtered in the night before. The place feels like a farm. If a cow, or say for example, is looking stressed in any way, they don't. As I know, they'll take it back to the farm for a few weeks and let it relax and calm down. They said they've had situations where there can't be many abattoirs where they've had cows come to the abattoir and then be taken away.
Yeah.
And so So it's like visiting. Going to show you the abattoir. Come on, nice day out. But everything, and watching, and the cow came into they call it the killing box. Wasn't stressed. It was relaxed. It didn't have a clue what was happening. And the speed it goes from animate object to, canvas bag of meat is.
Yeah.
And it was so simple and fast and humane. The suspended throat's cut, bled out, and was butchered with incredible precision and incredible care by people who really knew what they were doing.
Mm.
The meat was then allowed to rest effectively for 24 hours in a cooling chamber that takes it down from kind of room temperature gradually to zero, because then it doesn't freezes. There's nothing, and it's all selfish. It makes the meat taste better.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of respect everyone in that process showed that cow was remarkable. And I'd urge anyone that wants to keep eating meat to go and see this done properly, and to go and see it at a less careful level, and decide which one you want to eat. People care more about the type of fuel they put in the cars than the level of the quality of protein that they eat.
Yeah, and I think there's, I can hear a clicking, and I'm just worried that this is going to show up, because I've never heard a clicking before. Can you? Yeah.
So, I thought it was some sort of timer thing.
I just want to make sure that it's not coming through in
No, it won't come through.
what we're recording. No. What was the clicking?
It's when you play, it tells you the sound.
Like a metronome.
Right, okay,
Or metronome.
Gotcha. Oh, in that case, I wouldn't have started. I just thought, you never know, we're going to do this, and then the whole audio is going to have click, click, click in the background. Yeah.
Very rhythmic.
So I tell you, one of the, maybe kind of picking up on what you were talking about a moment ago about vegan foods, vegetarian foods being shaped into kind of meat-eating kind of options, and chicken nuggets and kind of fish fingers and burgers. So interesting discussion that I had with one of the team here was around this idea that we eat icons. So it's not so much about it representing meat, is that we see that as being a burger, that we see that as being a hot dog, that we see that as being, and that it's familiar. And for people who are meat eaters or non-meat eaters, that these are kind of, because it doesn't make sense to me that if you are vegan, you don't want to be a burger that bleeds. Quite frankly, you don't. And it's not targeted at that. I think it's targeted at people like yourself, myself, who are looking to balance out, let's say, be flexitarian or maybe vegetarian, and not on kind of moral grounds or whatever it may be. But I do find it weird that we have, if you go around the world, you have some incredible vegetarian cuisines and dishes, yet we've chosen to fashion a lot of vegetarian and vegan foods around meat-based dishes. It's almost like we've said, well, there's nothing better than meat-based dishes, so let's just try and take the meat out, which is the best part of a meat-based dish, and just try and plug in something that's kind of substandard. Rather than saying, as you kind of mentioned earlier, you've got loads of great fruits and vegetables, let's do something with them that does justice to them, rather than just trying to have them as constantly as a kind of consolation prize in some way for eating healthier.
No, absolutely. I mean, the flip side of that, the rise of the Impossible Burger, Arby's in the US did something called the Marrot, which was they shaped turkey to look like a carrot.
I saw that.
Which,
that looked awful.
It did, and
really
it was,
awful.
but it is quite funny. But I like the sense that they go, well, if it's reasonable to do that, it's reasonable to do this. No, I get your point. I think you're right. It is for the occasional, or the people that maybe want to shift their diet slightly, and the familiar. Again, if it makes people stop and think, that's where we are. But I think there's a much bigger picture here that people are kind of glossing over or sweeping past. It's I spend a lot of time in the US for various sort of stories and stuff, and it's portion sizes.
Right.
And in good restaurants and from sort of good mid-range upwards, it's sensible, and more and more places are doing the kind of the farm to fork thing or the
Right.
farmer's table.
Oh, I found everything when I was last in California. Everything was craft, everything was artisanal, everything was
Exactly.
local, everything was
Yep.
seasonal, everywhere. As
Yeah.
you said, from that kind of mid-level
Yeah. Would you
upwards,
like to meet the chicken?
And I thought,
Yes.
And I thought
Yeah.
we'd kind of
Yeah.
overdone it in the UK, but you go over there and you think, well, we haven't
No,
even touched
Yeah.
the surface of it.
And I think so you've got that on one extreme, and then you've got the sort of crowd pleasing places in Vegas where the portion size for one could feed a family of 4 for about 4 days. And again, it's trying to find some sort of balance there. I think because of that, I think that's the reliance on cheap meat, these massive production things. As I say, when vegans and vegetarians come after me and says, "I can't believe you eat that," well, look, we eat at home. We try and eat the best possible meat we can.
Yeah.
We are big celebrators of leftovers.
Hmm.
We use the bones to make stock. We do everything we possibly can, and I've probably doubled my efforts in seeing.
Well, I was going to
pigs
say, has all
die
this
and cows.
changed?
Absolutely.
Given that you've been in the industry for many, many years, and has this changed your perspective and appreciation for or your diet in some way, or how's it kind of impacted on what you write about, your perspective on?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a general moved, I think, towards eat less or drink less, but better, and that do something that's better quality and savor it. It's the difference between eating, I know, a really, really good piece of chocolate from, I said, Paul A. Young or William Curley, as opposed to grabbing a Whisper at the petrol station. One will stop you in your tracks. It's that good. It's that different.
Yeah.
It's that sensory hit on all sorts of levels. And one is just, it's a quick sugary fix. And I've found myself over the last X years trying to do more of the former once in a while, as opposed to, I need something sugary while I'm out, or I've just grabbed a sandwich, I need a fast dessert. So it certainly changed me on that. Seeing cows die for the steak book and watched pigs die in the Dehesa for National Geographic last year or 2 years ago. It has completely changed my attitude to meat. There's an old joke about the difference between involved and committed. And so with a plate of ham and eggs, the chicken's involved, the pig's committed. And when you see what the pig has, or the cow, whatever, have literally given themselves to sustain human life. They go, got to show it a bit of respect, got to use everything you possibly can. And I think, from the Fergus Henderson Knows the Tale stuff.
Well, I was going to
say,
I was just thinking it's inspired so much creativity within chefs as well, because I think over the last 20 years, the whole idea of kind of nose to tail eating and kind of really reducing the amount of waste and partially restaurants have always kind of done that because of food costs. They've always tried to use the bones for stock and the trimmings for whatever you can, and that's kind of been more of a food cost thing, but. There is more of a sense of as well kind of duty and responsibility and, kind of respect as well for the ingredients. And I think that's influenced a lot of chefs as well in terms of their creativity. And I have found that with what we do, even at our chef's table, the kind of move from, and I remember we did this from kind of about 2013, which is we said, well, rather than designing a menu and then doing a vegetarian menu, let's kind of start with a really great vegetarian menu and then look at where we can add the kind of protein or the meat onto it. And then that was mainly because I'd worked in restaurants of, great restaurants, Michelin star, amazing places. But if you were a vegetarian, you ended up with kind of the wild mushroom risotto or the butternut squash something.
Have an omelette. Yes.
Yeah, or the mozzarella and tomato salad. And it was just a bit like, wow. Surely you can, and we found that was a really good challenge as well, because it's so easy to kind of take a meat or a protein, put it on the plate, and then dress it up with some really interesting stuff. But to kind of take vegetables as and kind of look at that as more of your palette of ingredients or colors to work with, it gets interesting.
Yeah, I think Bruno Lube, his place when he was at Granary Square, was very much. it wasn't about meat being
Yeah.
the hero ingredient
Exactly,
and the vegetables
yes,
as
yeah,
the
yeah,
afterthought. It was
yeah,
sometimes it would be, okay, this is a vegetable dish, and then about the sixth ingredient on the list would be, and a shaving of
yeah,
whatever, dried beef or whatever. So it just became an element of, or a flavoring too, just a small part. Again, brilliant in terms of food waste. It's,
yeah,
if you're drying bits that you couldn't use otherwise. Also, coming back to the animal thing and the feeding humankind, is cows and pigs and sheep, etc., eat things we can't. So at the moment, to do this mass production, we're also feeding them grain that could be used to feed.
oh yeah,
I think there's the part of this report today. There's something, or a couple of years ago, there was a report from the United Nations, or suggesting there's 820 million people suffering starvation or suffering hunger across the planet at any given time.
Yeah.
And this, we've got to do more genetically modified. We've got to do this and that to feed the world. Actually, if we modify a lot of what we're doing, we could pretty much hit the target now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've got enough food on the earth to feed the 9 billion that we're so worried about by 2050, but it's just about how we're distributing it, a lot of it, right? And the food waste and curbing all that. And, there's a lot of those kind of issues kind of around it. But so do you think we're going to see the impossible Whopper here in the UK? Do you think this is something, is this going to happen? Are we going to see it go mainstream? Because I think what we were talking about here was only happening in St. Louis in a few restaurants over there. And then if it was successful, they were going to roll it out. Do you think this is something we're going to have here? Vegan fast
absolutely.
food?
I think it will be. Again, there is that, just from the novelty, the curiosity value of it. It's a long time, since I've been to a Burger King. But I walked past one the other day, and they're already doing there's a halloumi offering. So there is a big switch, and I think people are moving more to, if not vegetarian all the time, as you say, the flexitarian thing, trying to be good. But then I'd look back to, suppers with my grandfather when he came in from work, and 2-3 days a week it would be poached egg on toast, or a simple salad with a hard boiled egg, or a grating of cheese or something. And I go, well, actually, we're not trying to revolutionize anything. We're not doing anything new. It's just well,
it's as simple as a couple of generations ago. You just couldn't afford to eat meat 3 times a day,
and I think that's how it should be. I mean, the presence of cows on farms. There's lots of reports. There's lots of case studies where people have gone back to more manageable small holdings and kind of mixed use. Where the presence of sort of pigs have foraged and eaten all sorts of stuff.
Then the concern becomes that meat becomes only for the elite, for the rich, for the wealthy, and I don't know. It's really hard to kind of address that, because when you do, I'm all for having that balance in a way and saying, okay, well, as you said, it's exactly what you were saying, which is don't eat meat every day. Eat meat a lot less, but eat really good quality meat, and kind of prize that, value it, appreciate it, and but then, there is that kind of concern that, depending on who you're speaking to, you will have the concern of, but then that makes meat quite a kind of elitist thing that, because if you want it on that kind of small scale farming, which you can really appreciate and savor, not everyone's going to be able to appreciate it and savor it. I don't think we have a one size fits all solution, though.
No, absolutely.
I think it's so difficult to appease all the different kind of perspectives that you have on how we eat and consume meat specifically.
No, I think that disconnect. I think the loss of a lot of kind of home economics. So I think that's being revived, and I think it's a crucial part of any modern society. And I occasionally, as a writer, I get invited to ask to do things for live below the poverty line for a week, or sort of, you've got a £1. I'd never do it, because I think it's deeply patronising. For someone like me, where I have a moderate knowledge of cooking, but we also have a store cupboard full of good stock cubes and herbs and spices and things that can make very cheap ingredients taste really good.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, we will quite often at home just make a simple, like with a bit of chicken stock, either from the freezer or a cube, and like a little noodle soup or something will be a perfectly satisfactory supper. But if you haven't got the wherewithal to buy
I completely agree.
all of those things, it's a big investment. I do think there's and things like a shoulder of lamb, for example. If my wife and I buy one, we will get a huge number of meals from it, and it's slow cooked, etc., etc. But then we can also afford to run the oven for 7 hours. We can pay 15 quid up front for the shoulder of lamb, and the fact that it maybe comes down to the chicken thing. I mean, is probably the Hugh Fernie-Whittingshaw when he did his program a few years ago. No one would let him film in a battery farm, so he built his own, and then he was showing people how to use sort of chicken and not to do the leftovers, etc. I think the two key points from that were the people who are eating. Why would I pay this amount of money when I can get 2 for a £5 in Tesco's? And you go, well, the 2 for a £5, there's no meat on the legs, there's nothing on the wings because they haven't done any exercise. There's ammonia burns from the urine of the chickens stacked above them in these pens. There's very little nutritional value, whereas we might spend, say, £12 on a label anglais or something, but we will get 20 meals out of that by the time we've made stock, etc. And you go, well, that's coming down to what, 80, 70 p.m.
As you said, it comes back to knowing how to work with those ingredients.
And also having the £12 available in the first place. Yeah. So I think that, as you say, there is it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And again, that is why so there's needs to be a lot of adjustment at all sorts of levels in order to get to this. I do think that the food waste thing is a big part of everything now. I'm working with a restaurant at the moment. We're putting together a drinks list. Yeah. And everything down to we've met people. There's a project in South London called Mercato Metropolitano. Okay. Which is phenomenal. And it's a couple of guys who used to be involved with the slow food movement in Italy. Lots of food halls, lots of little counters doing different things. It's sort of between Borough and Elephant and Castle.
Oh, right, okay.
It's in I believe it's an old paper mill, kind of on the railway tracks. Phenomenal project. And they there's a brewery on site. So the water that they're serving in the other restaurants, to purify that, is being purified with the excess heat from the brewery. Oh, right, okay. So there's this beautiful kind of closed loop, and they're doing more and more things to try and...
I reckon we'll be seeing more of that. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
That's going to be
I think,
the next kind of big theme and trend that we see in not just chefs and restaurants, but in restaurant design as a whole?
No, absolutely. I think there's more and more where you can grow herbs, grow small amounts of vegetables on site. Yeah. We're going beyond the hives on the roof, the chili plants, etc. There's the capability now of doing all kinds of things. There's urban farms in East London where they're growing tilapia.
But you know what I always question about things like so what I question about things like urban farms is we value, when I say we, there are, and I can think of in France, in Spain, regions that will value ingredients, and it's based partially on kind of like the terroir in which they're grown, and that there's a certain kind of knowledge and land and soil and air and environment that leads to this great product. I don't know if London necessarily strikes me as having the right terroir. That it's great. I think in a sense it's really novel to say, oh, I've grown. So I have an issue with city foraging. I know of a Michelin star restaurant. It now has 2 Michelin stars. And I know a guy who went in, was doing a placement, and he said, yeah, well, they were doing something with pears, a dessert with pears that had been foraged from a tree in Shoreditch. I don't think those pears would taste very good from a tree in Shoreditch. No. I don't think that should be served on a 2 Michelin star menu. I think that it's meant to be a place where you're having great respect for great food and great products. And I think it looks great on the menu to say forage from London, but does that necessarily translate into
again? It's the bigger question of the nutritional value. It's the idea of this pear is delicious. It's got a very smoky kind of smoky, oily feel.
That's
It's,
the bum from last week who was lubricating the tree.
It's exactly. It's so I think so. Again, anything that's raising awareness, anything that's making people
Yeah.
question, maybe stopping and thinking what they're doing, maybe buying that little bit less. We, when we first got married 20 plus years ago, we were terrible at food waste. Our lifestyles were such that suddenly you'd buy things and then be out 2 or 3 nights, and then by the time you'd wander back to the fridge and there were
all the stuff at the back.
Yeah, and then every few months have to go through and what is that in foil and open it up. I still have no idea, but that should probably go in the bin.
Yeah.
And we made a concerted effort to stop that.
Yeah.
We have an allotment now where we have that for a sort of decade or more. So we grow a lot of our own. Well, so my wife grows a lot of our fruit and veg. I turn up and do petrol-driven mayhem and destruction anytime that's needed. She's the kind of creative force behind that. But it has changed our diet because we have access to those things. And I think, if we can encourage people to look at seasonality, it stopped us buying sort of tomatoes and cucumbers after about September. We wouldn't buy one from the supermarket. We wait till we have our own because they taste nicer.
Yeah, sure.
And
well, I mean, my biggest issue is with UK supermarket fruit and vegetables is that, quite frankly, tomatoes taste like something tomato-ish, but with a fishy after kind of note, and cucumbers are just kind of
it's suspended water,
kind of you know, in a structure that's green and has the right sensory cues, but none of the flavor to go with it. And I think this is why I was questioning earlier when we were talking about kind of the amount of nutrients that you actually have in these foods that you buy in the supermarket, even the fresh produce that you buy. I think is kind of questionable in a way as to whether you are getting all the nutrients that you need from these foods, because they seem to be. I remember walking into one of the large chain supermarkets and literally seeing a pack of frozen chicken that had as a marketing label, as a kind of, you know, announcing the fact that it was with added water.
Where was the water from? That was But I think, but you look at, again, it goes back to the polytunnel thing in Spain, and these acre after acre after acre. There are people that have died working in them. There's a lot of apparently kind of Moroccan virtually slave labor actually working in these things in order for us to get tomatoes out of season, which, as you say, don't even taste that good. And again, because you've got acre after acre of polytunnel, when people say, I can't believe you, how can you eat that cow? It's got beautiful brown eyes. And go, well, I know exactly where the cow came from. But B, that tomato you're eating has been, it's come out of a polytunnel. It's acres of polytunnel. That's destroyed insect life across however many square miles. It's lowered the temperature. Apparently, as the rest of the temperature of Spain has gone up 2 or 3 degrees, where the polytunnels are, it's actually gone down 1 degree.
Really?
There was at one point, it seemed like the Spanish government were trying to, or someone was trying to put that as an advantage, that we're counteracting global warming by doing all of this.
That's
not
a reach.
Not quite. But then, because the insects have gone, the small birds have gone.
Yeah, sure.
Then the small birds have gone, then the small mammals have gone, the larger mammals. So there's an entire ecosystem that's been destroyed. And so you're coming after me for one cow. You've wiped out.
Well, I guess
40
shows
species.
like Cowspiracies and stuff Cowspiracy did a really good kind of job of maybe educating people on some of the kind of very easy, low-hanging fruit facts, right? About kind of how much water and resources go into animal husbandry and farming. And I guess there hasn't yet been, maybe that's your next project, Neil, is to go into Almeria with an undercover video camera and check out the polythene
No, absolutely. I think
farming.
Yeah, I think anything that's kind of effectively a monoculture is not good. I think we need to take a step back and kind of acknowledge the ecosystem.
Yeah,
it's been so if you leave things alone, as we keep saying, I mean, this whole idea of we're killing the planet. Go, planet's going to be fine. The planet's done Control Alt Delete 5 times, 6 times before. it's us that's
Sure.
under threat. It's humankind that's under threat. And I think if there's, we need to start reframing sort of the climate thing as, yes, and you leave a city, people abandon a town. Within months, there's plants growing on buildings. Within
Sure.
years, trees have sort of taken over, and it's the planet and nature is going to thrive and find ways around this. It's us that's the problem.
Well, it is. Well, it is, and so one of the things that kind of strikes me when we always talk about, this idea of food waste, and we're talking about it in the context of kind of restaurants and what chefs are trying to do, and I think it's great because it's shedding a lot of light on it for people. And if anything, there's that kind of education part of if more restaurants are looking at sustainable ingredients and zero waste and kind of more biodiversity in what we're eating, and I think that's a great way because chefs have a pretty decent platform now globally in which they kind of have a following where people are really taking note of what chefs are actually kind of doing, what their interests are, beyond just kind of recipes, but their philosophies, let's say. So I think that's really kind of useful because a lot of the waste is generated at home, right? I mean, a lot of it is on the farm and at home.
Absolutely.
And restaurants are kind of, as I said, for food cost reasons alone, restaurants try typically to go pretty low on waste. So what do you think we need to be doing at home? Do you have any thoughts on what's the future of that part of it?
Good question. I think that the more people cook, I was taught growing up, smell things.
Yeah.
There's still a certain, or the difference between use by dates and best before dates. I know too many people that say, it's just gone past, it's best before, so we'll throw it out. It's still good. And also we've always gone 2 days past its use by date. Okay, well, I imagine that a lot of producers and a lot of supermarkets are putting an arbitrary date on that piece of bacon or whatever. So open the packet, smell it. If it still smells okay, but people just kind of throwing these things away.
No, I agree because I think a couple of, you look at even just my father's generation. My father's from Egypt. He would be able to tap on a watermelon and tell you if it was good to eat. Right. I think that sensory kind of relationship with it. You wouldn't walk into a supermarket chain. You wouldn't walk into any fishmonger or supermarket and look at the fish, would you? You wouldn't manhandle. I think people, they'd be all over you.
Pop the eyes and do whatever,
But you just, that kind of everything in supermarkets are in bags. And I think that sensory relationship with food, and as you said, being able to, people are afraid to take a sip of milk in case it's sour. And I think I'm 38 and I remember being young and taking a sip of sour milk and it was just, if it was sour, you threw it out and otherwise you drank it.
Or made scones or whatever. And that's the thing. There are ways of using up some of these things regardless.
Yeah.
But I think again, it's this is something other people do, or this disconnect between, is this good? I don't know. And if you can encourage people to look at things, or even if this is starting to go brown, it's still probably edible if it's a green vegetable of some description. So just cook it in this way, or if it doesn't look appealing, make it into a soup. There's still probably ways around it, but it's having the ability or the knowledge and the time.
You just reminded me of something with that kind of, if it doesn't look right. There was I guess about a year or 2 years ago, there was one of the supermarket chains had done something around ugly fruits or ugly vegetables.
Yeah, the wonky vegetables and things,
Why was that a flash in the pan kind of thing? Where's all that fruit and veg gone now?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's
so strange that because the aesthetic aspect, and I understand this kind of working with, Charles Spence from Oxford University, looking at the sensory side of food, how important the visual aspect of it is, and having a, bright red apple, shiny and looking perfect in amongst other shiny, perfect looking apples makes it all that more desirable. But it's interesting how, with the concerns that we all have around food waste, that wonky fruit kind of vegetable thing hasn't become a bit more commonplace.
Yeah, I think on our local Waitrose, I know still has. We certainly see the onions where there's kind of But again, we've always wondered when they said, we have to make them look. They have to look a certain way because otherwise people won't buy them. And was that customer choice in the first place, or was that
Well, I have a
imposed
theory
somewhere
on
above the
this.
chain.
I have a theory. Was it not the fact that maybe, I don't know, a few decades ago, they realized that when people were shopping, all the stuff left at the bottom was the less perfect stuff. And they thought, well, rather than us having this waste, let's just start passing it on to the farmer and saying, we're not going to take this stuff. So I don't
Yeah.
know, because I don't think supermarkets are evil either. I don't think they
Mm-hmm.
are kind of evil. And I don't think that we as consumers have necessarily, I think they look at our shopping habits, and I think we're just doing what we do, which is picking the freshest,
Yeah, yeah.
reddest looking, best apple. And if all the other shittier looking ones are basically there, we'll leave them
Yeah.
behind. And they've took that as a sign of, hey, you know what, let's figure out a way of actually kind of well, you know, taking less of a loss on this
Mhm.
and passing the loss on to someone else. And now we've created that in a way, and we're
Yeah.
having to deal with it.
Yeah, I think it kind of spirals and spirals and spirals. And it becomes this kind of almost self-fulfilling prophecy, as you say, we'll pass the cost on
Yeah.
to somebody else. It's, as my granddad used to go to a local greengrocer's and ask for the bruised bananas and the bruised plums and all the, and they'd come back, and then he would spend a very happy afternoon peeling and stewing fruit.
Yeah.
And I guess, I imagine, well, I've been in enough restaurants to know that the things that come into the kitchen are not necessarily the prettiest looking vegetables. They look amazing on the plate when they go out, but they would be cutting out bruises and
Oh, yeah, sure.
bits.
Yeah.
So people are eating these things, but they won't do it at home, whether it's because they don't know that what to remove or how to do it or how to still make it taste good. The shunning of the ripe banana is something that I find very confusing. Because, oh, well, that one's has gone brown, it'll be no good. You go, no, that's
probably
delicious.
the tastiest it's
That's
gonna
the
be.
delicious one. That's not the still yellow, slightly raw one.
Yeah.
That's what it should be.
Yeah.
But again, we've kind of gone away from understanding that notion, or we associate that color or that shape or that slightly shriveled with bad.
Yeah.
And pristine and wonderful and whole is what we need. So again, maybe there's the education thing. It's encouraging more people to cook, to do things like, or to pickle things. I think that the rise of the fermented food and the rise of pickling has been an interesting development. And I would hope there's a lot of stuff that's now being preserved rather than binned. I think we've got a lot better recently in terms of recycling waste or putting like domestic compost bins and that kind of thing is happening a little more. We're making small steps, whether they're big enough steps at this point, or whether we just need to, as I say, rethink everything. Is we're in a strange position at the moment. I think we've got the knowledge and the wherewithal and the enthusiasm to do it,
and the technology now as well is coming up in. Like, one of the reasons that this was on my mind as well was because of the kind of different type of food sensors that they want to bring in now that might be more of a kind of chemically sound way of being able to identify whether foods are actually spoiled or not. And I think that's interesting that, rather than, but again, I think it's interesting and it's a great way of technology coming in and actually helping us curb food waste. But I also think it's yet another reason why we will lose that relationship with being able to tell whether food is fresh or not, because it's a chemical analysis. You say, well, that's going to do it better than my nose or my taste buds are. I mean, if the sensor tells me that the milk's off, I don't need any more proof. And that's a bit of a shame. Not that I want people drinking sour milk, but the point is, I think it's a bit of a shame that, again, it's that sensory relationship with food and just the degree of separation between us and how we relate to food in a way, and how we appreciate it and enjoy it. And it stems from everything from where the food comes from, as you were saying earlier, and there not being a correlation between children seeing fillets of chicken, kind of, chicken fillet packed and breast packed into, a vacuum sealed bag, and that chicken that's on the farm. And the relationship that they have with being able to just even tell quality and enjoyment and appreciation, that whole chain, I think, is being disrupted in some way. I think, technology can help, but I think we also, have a long way as individuals as well to try and rekindle that, or there is a duty in some way to try and do that.
I have a friend told me he has twins. I think they're five or six, and they came home from school one day, and the little boy decided he was going to be a vegetarian because and he was like, so the chicken that we eat is the same as the chicken. I said, yeah. And he said, well, I don't think I want to do that. So I said, no, great. If you don't want to, that's fine. We will make sure that you still eat healthily, that we'll do this, and we can look into this for you and check this out and make sure. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. And then he said about 15 minutes later, he came up to us and said, wait, what's bacon? And he said, well, that's pig. He said, I'll forget that then. That's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine. No, I'm not a vegetarian anymore. But again, I think you do need to, if you tell children, this is how it is, and let them make a choice. But again, also make them stop and think about the vegetable, the nutritional value of the soil, what's happened there. Again, I think we need to start listing the pesticides and the herbicides and the fungicides and all these other chemicals. This presumption that I have a strawberry from Harrods, therefore it must be much better than this.
And that's
piece
what
of
we're
meat from
feeding
Burger
as well,
King.
the animals, not strawberries, but let's say the corn and all the other stuff that we're growing for animals, they're being fed this as well, and then we're consuming it.
Yeah.
So there's that part as well, that it's kind of, I think we generally don't really, or we turn a blind eye towards that part of it, especially when it comes to vegetables, and maybe the impact that could have in the long term.
No, it'd be interesting to see with this, the sensors. And if they're in a warehouse or one of these industrial greenhouses, and say, actually, no, this has all gone too far. Is it then wasted, or has it gone too far for the next however many days of shipping to get it to and packaging, or could it go to a soup manufacturer who can do something with it straight away and give it an extended life?
Yeah.
So if there's again, it's not necessarily a bad thing if there's a bigger infrastructure behind it. The same with, I know lots of restaurants serving lobster at the moment. You go, well, I know a few places that just throw the shells out. And you go, well, if you find someone, and so if you find somewhere, it was more hassle to cook them down and make bisque or whatever else. So they didn't have the ability to do that.
All right.
But if somebody came along, brilliant. And I think hopefully we're starting to get to a stage where people are being a little more collaborative.
And again, technology is facilitating that really well. I've seen lots of kind of startups and apps that are looking at kind of collecting waste from restaurants and redistributing it in kind of the way that you're talking about. Yeah. So I think that's kind of happening in some way.
With the exhibition at the Victoria and Albert with the mushrooms being grown on coffee grounds. Is fantastic. Yeah. And so then there must be any number of sort of cafes and bars and restaurants that are just throwing coffee grounds away.
Sure.
And so, but they make fantastic compost. Or get together with other restaurants in the area. Take them to these people that are doing these kind of hydroponic things, grow mushrooms, and then at least there is a sense of, I don't know, some sort of circular thing. Native, very, very good restaurant in Southwark, are doing all sorts of really interesting, creative things. Again, if you do the tasting menu, you'll often get like sort of fish skin as a sort of fried, so it's a wafer, and little trimmings from other things that they haven't used for the main meal the day before.
Mm-hmm.
So they recycle everything as really creative, clever snacks. And I had a penne dish there last year, which was delicious. But the penne was actually courgette stalks.
Ah, right.
Because they're hollow.
Yeah.
And they said if you blanch them and then cook them, they have a certain sort of al dente texture like pasta. But it's something that these huge leaves that otherwise get thrown away. The use of, sort of carrot tops and all these things, the leaves and all these bits.
I think it adds to the creativity of chefs.
Absolutely.
I really do think that these kind of, Professor Spence and I had started writing a paper a couple of years ago about this idea that restrictions breed creativity in gastronomy. Mm-hmm. So, because I always get asked, doesn't the science limit the creativity? And because you're so interested in that kind of whether it's the sensory science, whether it's the culinary science, whatever it is. And my response has always been no. I think if anything, it kind of adds in a way to the the toolbox or
Mhm.
palette of colors that we have, and allows us to tap into different areas. And I think in some ways, a certain degree of restriction makes, breeds creativity. It gets you thinking in ways that you wouldn't have had you not had those restrictions or had you. And I think chefs specifically looking at addressing some of the kind of issues around zero waste and sustainability, and it's getting them to be much more creative and using ingredients in ways that they would typically never otherwise have really thought to. But it's encouraging that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I guess, yeah, hard to have any conversation without mentioning Brexit at the moment. It'll be interesting to see what happens with our own food culture and the distribution of if we can't bring things in. I was writing about Moscow restaurants recently, and they there's a huge shift there into traditional Russian food. And
I've
putting
kind
big
of seen
twists on
this,
that
right? Okay.
because of the tariffs and all the problems of
Right.
importing stuff. So they're having to rely on their own farms and their own production, which goes back to the dishes people grew up eating, the really traditional things, and people putting a chefy spin on the sort of hearty stews and borscht and all kinds of other things, and pickling and fermenting things. So, as you say, maybe there is certainly nothing or necessity being the sort of mother of invention, or nothing succeeds by the fact that you have these things and you need to use them. From whether it's from the margin perspective or just an abhorrence of the waste. So it'll be interesting to see, I think, what happens after the 31st of October. Apart from, as opposed to the abject terror leading up to the 31st of October. But it said maybe, again, from adversity maybe comes some sense of positivity.
So for me, one of the interesting kind of everything that we've talked about makes me think about the restaurant of the future and the London restaurant scene and what it's going to look like in the next kind of 10, 20 years, because I think a lot of what we've talked about so far, from sustainability through to technology and just social habits and how people are kind of consuming food. Let's not even say whether they have an interest in how it's grown or whatever, just how we're consuming, because if you think off the back of a lot of delivery food services, people are now ordering more, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
And even when I was young, even till now, I find the notion of ordering breakfast would be a really weird thing to do. It just wouldn't be something that I would. Lunch, I kind of get at the office, people ordering that in, and dinner, but it's just become one of those things that's so normal to kind of order. We're seeing the effect of this on restaurants. We're seeing the effect of this on chains and high street. What are the future kind of trends, or what do you think? How is all this going to impact restaurants in the London food scene?
That's a good question. I think we are going through it. I think there's a massive shakedown at the moment, certainly in that kind of mid-range. The loss of Jamie's Italian for whatever reason, the restaurants at that level. I think there was a point there was suddenly an interest in food culture in the UK, which we maybe hadn't had properly for a long, long time. We've always been good at ingredients. We've always been good at a certain level. But then that realization that we could be London could be an interesting food city, but the same thing's now being repeated in Manchester and Bristol and Liverpool and Glasgow's got an amazing restaurant scene at the moment. And he's seeing it's kind of finally spread across the UK. And I think there's a lot of things that expanded very rapidly without necessarily getting the infrastructure in place.
Right.
Knowing that, I know of a couple of restaurant groups that say, well, we've opened this one and it's doing brilliantly, therefore we should open another 8. And then realize they've opened another 8 and all they've done is spread the number of people that were going to that restaurant across 8 sites and upped their overheads. I think the rent and rates thing at the moment, that's going to need a lot of adjustment. I know of a restaurant, I walked past their place the other day and it sadly closed after 50 plus years. But they'd been hit with I think it was a 60% rate increase.
Wow.
I said, we can't.
That makes it tough.
Yeah.
It's a tough industry as it is without
And yeah, footfall seems to be down. Costs are up.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it's hard to get good stuff as well.
Yeah.
It's not just that, but restaurants now, and especially kind of well, not so much mid-range, but I'm talking kind of especially in the kind of high-end fine dining. It's becoming increasingly difficult to get people who want to work those hours, want to work under
Sure.
those conditions, and will do that. And I've kind of, from speaking to people, realized that it's become the whole notion of kind of 4 days on, 3 days off has become a lot more popular. Whether you you still work the hours and you still do that, but
concentrate. Yeah.
and it's interesting to see that, because you're right, definitely in the kind of high street chains, even the kind of Jamie's places and all that, definitely a lot of kind of issues there. But I was surprised to see the amount of as well kind of like Gordon Ramsay's Maze. They closed that down and opened Lucky Cat now, and I think Maze, I don't want to say how much I think that they had lost, but it was a number that I just kind of gawked at to see how much they'd lost in 1 year. And then in Chiswick, Hedone.
Yes. Yeah.
Seeing that close down. And that was like, I think, a great place with great reviews. I think, had a Michelin star. And it's really crazy to think that even if you have a restaurant with a Michelin star, you have great reviews, you've got great kind of product and experience there, that even that's not necessarily enough these days to secure your business.
Yeah,
I think.
No, it's interesting to see. I think there is a. It will be interesting with the more we tank sterling, the more appealing we become to tourists, which is possibly one saving grace. But whether you can persuade them to do the food tourism thing, and we touched before we started recording, we're talking about is there a genuine the Michelin star idea, the 3 stars is worth taking a flight for? Is there a restaurant of that caliber in London at the moment? And I'm struggling to. I'd love to be able to name one, but I can't. There's a lot of very, very good places.
And this is what we were talking about earlier. I mean, in terms of international cuisines as well, London has nailed it. I mean, Thai food in France, Thai food in, I don't know, Italy and Greece is nothing like how good Thai food is, or Indian or Chinese or international cuisines are here in London. I think we have an amazing city in terms of the diversity of chefs and backgrounds and cultures. And I think we've tapped into all sorts of interesting kind of as well ethnic cuisines, and people are doing it at a really interesting kind of level as well. And at all levels, from street food to kind of the high end. And I think we've got such an amazing spectrum of all of that. But yeah, I always have that question, which is kind of, if you had a friend who was coming over for 1 week or one night to London, they said, I want an experience that I just cannot find
where's
anywhere.
our Noma, where's our El Cello, where's our whatever,
Yeah. And it's London 2019, and it baffles me that we're one of the most expensive restaurant cities, one of the most diverse restaurant cities, one of the best restaurant cities, but we don't necessarily, have that experience.
Kind of
arguably,
pushing,
some people would say we do, and fair enough, but I don't think on an experiential level, and I'm not talking about just the food. So it's not just about the kind of having amazing food. Plenty of places out there doing that. But an experience that you wouldn't find somewhere else, or that is unique in a way to London, I think. So what's the restaurant of the future looking like? What will draw people in? What will a Michelin star isn't enough to save you, and having 8 sites across London isn't enough to save you. So what is it?
I think, increasingly, the things that I've enjoyed most recently, and I think we're going to see a lot more of. We've got to get to a stage where we're constantly reinventing the high street, because, as I say, rent and rates are becoming so astronomical. We've either got to have a rethink in terms of landlords and suggesting that if you keep the high street alive, then everything else you're trying to do to rent the rest of your building will follow. The number of places I've seen that have had massive rate or rent increases, and 3 years later the restaurant site is still empty.
Yeah.
And well, surely it was better to have 3 years of rental income of some level than no income, excuse me, whatsoever. I think if you take the Altrincham market model, and which extended to Mackie Mare in Manchester. And now I have the Market Hall concept in Fulham and Victoria, opposite Victoria Station, and one opening on Oxford Street later this month, I think.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Where it's places that are, I know, ready to have a second restaurant or a different concept, but it's a shared building. There's different counters. You go and pay at each counter, and then certainly in the Market Hall thing, I think they run the bar.
Yeah.
And then they have the staff that will clear your table, so it's communal seating.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
So you go around. It's brilliant for large groups because there's none of that. Well, I didn't have the prawns. You've already gone to the counter you wanted.
Yeah.
You've ordered your food, and it arrives where you're sitting, or you bring it back to where you're sitting.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a very good opportunity for a lot of places to kind of see whether, I know, their street food concept or their pop-up idea or their supper club has the legs to go to something bigger. Same thing with the shipping container places. Like Pop Brixton.
Yeah.
They let people get to a certain level, and then where you've had a year of this, it's time for you to move on, and somebody else gets that space.
Yeah.
Then you've got places like Cricket, the Indian restaurant. They've now extended that to left Pop Brixton, and they have bricks and mortar in Soho.
Okay.
So it's been a good learning curve for them. There's a lot of restaurants that fold just because it was a glamorous thing to do, and I think people think, I could run a restaurant.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
The drunken conversation of
Oh yeah. Or all your friends telling you you're a great cook and that you should. Definitely.
And doesn't necessarily translate to being
Running
a success.
Successful business. Yeah.
But I think things that kind of share the cost or reduce those costs are going to be bigger. I think there'll still
What's going to be attracting consumers? What are they looking for? Because you can now have a 3 Michelin star meal, it would seem, delivered to your home.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you go to the restaurant? Why would restaurants bother opening? Why wouldn't you have it all as dark kitchens?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there is still something about that shared experience, that communal feel about not doing the washing up. That's certainly a big point for me. Having someone that could guide you to things that you wouldn't necessarily choose. You want that sense of creativity, or nudging you towards a wine that you didn't know, or an ingredient you didn't know. I think that's certainly a big part of it. Again, it's maybe we have, again, going back to the 50s, 60s, whatever, where eating out was a luxury.
Yeah.
Maybe we have gone too far the other way, and there needs to be this shaking down. See what's happening in other cities. And so I spent a lot of time in Manchester of late, and there's an awful lot of things. It's just in Ancoats, in one block, there's a restaurant called Manor, which I think Marina O'Loughlin recently described as the most exciting food she'd had this year.
Oh, wow.
And literally in the same block, there's a place called the Hip Hop Chip Shop that's brilliant, but just doing interesting things with deep fried
I think I saw you post
food.
that.
They're terrific.
Okay.
And the mushy pea fritters and stuff.
Yeah.
Huge bowl for £3. I have no idea how they're doing it. I'm very concerned about their margins, but it's delicious. But they literally share a postcode with something that will probably get Manchester's first Michelin star. Wow. You hope there's enough footfall.
Would it be Manchester's first Michelin star?
Yeah, there's
first Michelin star of recent years.
First ever.
Wasn't there a restaurant called Juniper there years and years and years ago?
Maybe there was, but it's there for a long, long time. They've been pushing and pushing and kind of questioning the Michelin Guide, why they're not getting any recognition. Well, they've had sort of Aidan Burns places and some really good restaurants over the years. Again, you hope that there's going to be the interest within the city, or whether people will make a journey up. I know there's a restaurant in Stockport called Where the Light Gets In, and after a national paper had reviewed it, they had 1,000 bookings in a day.
Wow.
And they're a 26 cover place, so that's did them.
No, we've seen that with our chef's table. It's amazing how sometimes the right placement in the right kind of publication or newspaper or it can kind of have a huge impact, definitely.
And hopefully that then builds to some sort of longevity. I think I'm slightly wary of the whole Instagram influencer thing of when people say,
Why?
we've got
Why,
to-"
Neil? Why? Why
Well,
are
it's
you
just-
concerned about influencers and Instagram?
Only from the restaurant perspective.
Yeah.
So when people say, we've got to make our food look good for
Yeah.
Instagram, I go, well, yeah. You're a chef. You were literally trained to make food look good
Yeah.
before Instagram. It doesn't have to be for the Insta. And also the kind of people that are following an influencer to get all that dessert's really pretty.
Yeah.
They come along, they have the same dessert, they take the same photo, and then the next week they're going to wherever else somebody else has recommended.
Yeah.
It doesn't build a relationship.
I agree.
You get a little spike.
Yeah.
Maybe that then kind of disseminates to, they post the photo and their
Yeah.
followers, and maybe there is a second and a third and a fourth wave, and maybe one of those will go, I love this place. This is going to become my local.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess all publicity is good publicity. But I think this concept of we have to aim at these people because that will be that'll make us successful isn't necessarily going to translate.
Do you think there's there's a lot more kind of dining awards and guides and stuff like that coming up? Do you think that's going to, how relevant is all that? And there can be a count of the best restaurants in the world. There can be, guides that, list their ones and award them whatever kind of accolade it may be, whether it's a star or whatever else. And are their choices being driven by that?
It's a good question. I really don't know. I think historically I always felt that you'd read a Sunday supplement, somebody talking about a restaurant, giving it a positive review. I think we should go.
Yeah.
And then you might then go online to back up your decision.
Yeah.
I think now it's slowly shifting so that a lot of online stuff will inspire you to go and book somewhere.
Yeah.
It's just trying to find those. Excuse me. It's trying to find those. I would call them. I'd refer to a couple of people I know as palates I trust.
Yeah.
So if they've found somewhere,
yeah,
okay, I'm probably going to like that. And I think you find the same with restaurant reviewers, or the likes of Fred Sirik's shows on TV and Tom Kerridge and stuff, but they're kind of celebrating really good familiar food. And I think from the majority of the public, I think there's a lot of talk at the moment that Filipino food is going to be the new sort of big wave across the UK.
Oh, yeah?
Which I think has got potential because it's familiar.
Okay.
It's sort of South America meets Asia.
Right. Okay.
So it's lots of things we know, but in a combination that
was new
not.
and interesting and right. Okay.
Whereas before it was historically we would have had kind of whatever Indian restaurants and then Chinese restaurants.
Yeah.
Thai kind of
Thai
really
took
swept.
over, I mean, I have to say, between being at university and kind of within that next 10 years, Thai seemed to pop up everywhere. And then I was amazed at seeing how many pubs had Thai restaurants in them. That was a really interesting kind of combination that I never would have thought would have caught on over here, but it seemed, and there's a few good places like that.
No, exactly. And then I think there's been a lot of kind of Korean places or things with Korean flavors.
Yeah.
Which I think, we know the sour, salty, sweet, whatever of the Thai food.
Yeah.
So taking it in a slightly different direction is recognizable. And I think Filipino's nicely placed because it's very pork heavy. It's very there's the odd little spicy thing. There's some really good things. They use a lot of crackling. So I think there's a lot of things that the Brits will recognize.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see. And it's accessible.
Yeah.
How that translates into what kind of restaurant we go to, as I say, I think we need to kind of come back to this idea of a restaurant or a bar or a cafe as a hub.
Yeah.
And make them, where possible, certainly at a certain level, they're a local hub of community life, like the pub used to be, and we've maybe sort of stepped away from that. But where we are losing a lot of things on the high street, and they were going to become no-go areas unless we do something to really change those. So maybe there's a possibility here of kind of complete reinvention.
Yeah.
Just need someone with some sort of vision,
Yeah.
I think, to really sort of push this forward. I think there is genuinely an interest in food now. I used to joke that when from the Jamie Oliver days of The Naked Chef and 25 years ago, those TV programs, and people would watch them and said it was literal food porn, as in you watched other people do it, but you had no intention of trying that at home.
Yeah.
And but now I do think that people are watching these things, and if they're not doing the recipe completely,
Yeah.
they're
Taking
well, that's an
inspiration in
interesting
some way.
trick, or that's an interesting technique, and we could try that next time.
Yeah.
So I think there is a problem of talking with your hands. So I think we're in an interesting position. I think
Mhm.
there's a chance here to do some really, really good things, and to really reinvent society, reinvent what we do with cafes and restaurants.
Sure.
Really celebrate local culture.
Yeah.
Really encourage the farming things. We said this big picture idea of going back to almost basics. It's interesting to see, more and more people that are shopping at butchers as opposed to supermarkets, or the rise of kind of artisan bread, where suddenly bread doesn't seem to be this bag of mixed chemicals that you get from certain supermarkets, or the long life things. It should be something that you go and buy from someone that's made it,
Sure.
or make it yourself. It's not the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
It's
and very, very enjoyable process.
indeed,
and very
it's
gratifying
hugely
at the end.
therapeutic.
Yeah.
Slapping dough around is massively therapeutic.
The whole process, even taking care of the yeast and everything, is I think is great to do with kids as well and families. And I think
no, exactly. I think there's from friends with kids, I know there's a lot of them are now cooking with them or encouraging them to do it.
And that's great, because a lot of what we've talked about, I think a lot of the education starts with schools, and that's a whole different topic. But I think that kind of, in terms of the sense, when we were talking about waste and sensory relationship with food and all that, and I think a lot of that starts, we need to look at how that works in schools. So part of our discussion went blank there, but hopefully we're back on.
Yes.
So we were talking about the restaurants of the future. We've got a bit of an idea on that. What are you working on that's interesting now? What's exciting you?
Good question. Funny, and also on the restaurant of the future thing. Been talking to Daniel Ballou a little while back, and he has a concept in Boston called Spice, SPYCE.
Okay.
Which it's a project he created with 4 MIT students.
Okay.
And they were at a point of they wanted something healthy and nutritious to eat, but couldn't afford it on a student budget. Being robotics students, they decided to see, well, is there anything we can do with our knowledge?
Sure.
And they've created, so it's the cooking is done effectively kind of robotic woks.
Okay.
But because of that reduces the staff cost, therefore the quality of ingredients is that bit higher for the price they're charging.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of human interaction at the end. I think the person taking the money is, and they finish with, I don't know, it's a squeeze of that or a sprinkle of that, or we make it look pretty with this, and then package it up and hand it to you.
Yeah.
But again, as I say, whether it's be slightly concerned in terms of the loss of kind of human employment. However, perhaps it also means that there is an opportunity to feed people for better, for less. So I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah.
And also using a site that you don't need an awful lot of space. It has to have this. It doesn't need a massive kitchen. It doesn't need
well, that's another
all this
big
stuff. It's kind of a self-contained
You can put more
thing.
bums on seats and less kitchen space.
Yeah. And that's quite interesting. And they, as I say, I think they cook at a slightly higher temperature because there's no one to complain about. So the food can be cooked quite sort of quickly and efficiently, and that's potentially better, I think, nutritionally, if it's kind of the stir fry idea. So that I think is quite interesting. Beyond that, I mean, my current activities, it's standard freelance journalism thing of hello, lots of waving, give me a job kind of thing. So I've just finished a book for Goodman, the state restaurant, their 10th anniversary thing. Just
Oh, awesome.
was a lot of fun. And then
And is that why you were looking at the slaughtering
Yes.
process, and that was
Yeah,
all
yeah.
part of that project?
we
right?
went to see. We didn't want to do a cookery book.
Yeah.
Sort of Hawksmoor have kind of sewn up the state cookery book idea, but we thought, well, the story of the restaurant and the story of how everything gets to the plate. So we spent time on farms. We went
amazing.
to the name of the oven is just the Josper oven factory.
Oh, okay.
So we went out to Spain
Yeah.
to see that. So every element that makes the restaurant what it is. But again, it kind of echoes back to a lot of what we've discussed. There, it's
Yeah.
not just what's on the plate; it's the
Looking at the whole
ambience
context
and the
and the
whole
whole-
context, the quality of the staff, the longevity of the staff, which has been quite remarkable. So we're looking, hopefully, so with the photographer and the designer, we're talking to some other restaurants about doing similar projects
That's amazing.
for them, which would be quite nice. Having done the two kind of sort of jokey books, it's nice to do something a little more. Yeah, I'm a lover of comic asides and puns, and I don't necessarily want to do that forever. I think there is still scope. I think people take food at a certain level very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And I think there does have to be a sense of it's meant to be fun. When
Totally.
you go out and enjoy
yeah,
yourself. It's not, I
totally.
mean, all the stuff you do is,
Yeah.
as we said before, it's that
It has to be
bonding
fun
and that shared
engaging,
experience.
Yeah.
It's not just about worshipping
Yeah.
food. It has to be, and it's not just about
Yeah, I did go
It's
to
food
a
for fuel. It's-
restaurant last or sometime earlier this week that had that very, very old school formal style of service. And as much as I was telling you about this, I really appreciate it, and I see that there needs to be places doing that. But I think in today's landscape, people are looking for something a lot more fun, laid back, engaging. Great food, but without all the, not so much without the pomp and ceremony. I think people appreciate that part of it as well, but without maybe some of the stiffness and just kind of, where people who are working there look as excited to be there as you are. And I think that is what kind of these days kind of gets me at least excited about
you want
places.
a level of engagement. I think it's why when I like shopping at markets, partly because I work from home and it's quite often desperate for human contact and conversation. And you get a lot more of that than you do at a supermarket. But you also get to meet the people who've very often, they've either made what they're selling you or at least on site when it was made, or they can introduce you to the person it was. They can tell you everything that's gone into it, why you should be eating this. So I spent a very happy year working part-time at Neal's Yard Dairy. So I think there's an extension of that. Just the enthusiasm and the absolute love that went into making Neal's Yard what it is.
Yeah.
That and the level of support for the cheesemakers, all the things that they did historically.
Yeah.
And they've just celebrated their 40th anniversary.
Wow.
So there's
Wow.
clearly there is a market for this. There is a
Yeah.
market for doing things
Yeah.
doing things right, which starting to see certainly on a smaller scale, more and more people doing that.
And hopefully they'll be around in another
Gives you a little
40.
it gives you a little sense of hope, I think, in terms of strange political times and other things. I think the food community is something that could really sort of pull together and be at the forefront of some really good things going forward.
That's a positive note to end on.
Well, we try.
Neil, thank you
Thank
ever
you so
so
much,
much
sir.
for coming.
Good to see you.
No, it's been amazing. Thank you.
Cheers.